My name is Susan Norse, and I'm the Assessment Coordinator for Forsyth County Schools. Today, we are going to be talking about EOG and EOC. This is your Examiner Pre-Administration Training. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, so again, this is the Forsyth County end of grade, end of course Examiner Pre-Administration Training for spring 2022. We'll do our agenda today will focus on the Georgia milestones overview. We'll talk about responsibilities for examiners before testing, during testing, and after testing. This recording is meant to be part of the training that will be provided to you by your school test coordinator. All right. So our Georgia milestones assessments are a summative assessment, and they're considered an assessment of learning. They take place at the end of the year. They measure the Georgia Standards of Excellence, and the results are used for instructional practices, to review curriculum mapping, evaluate academic programming, and to see supporting students' needs in the next grade level or course. There's something new this year, and it's called interactive reporting, and I'm so excited about this. Teachers will actually receive a DRC account. DRC is the company that provides the platform for student management for this milestones tests, and teachers will actually receive an email. I'll set up a DRC account for you. You'll receive an email from DRC probably somewhere around maybe the last week of March, anywhere after March 22nd, start looking for an email from DRC. And this account, once you set it up, it's going to allow you to access your students' reports in the DRC platform. If you are a middle school or or an elementary teacher and you're familiar with the Beacon reports and the Beacon testing, it will be very similar. So it'll be really helpful for school test coordinators. They don't have to print out pieces of paper and give them to you. You'll be able to log into the platform and look at your students' results and reports. And there will be very specific training about interactive reporting. On March 22nd, I have my state training, and then I will create a recording for you so you can watch and learn how to access interactive reporting. And of course, we'll always be here to help. So this year, you know, the last 2 years of state testing have been the last year has been a little bit crazy, and we actually waived state testing in 2020. But this year, there are no flexibility waivers from the Department of Education. State testing will proceed as it always has been in the past. All students receiving virtual instruction are expected to test. And this year, the 95% participation requirement is back. Last year, we did do state testing, but the federal government waived the 95% participation requirement. If less than 95% of our students participate in the state assessment, it does impact the school's CCRPI score, and they do receive a lower CCRPI score. So that's really important. Last year, we thought, you know, we had pretty good outcome of students taking the state test, but out of all of our elementary schools and all of our middle schools, we only had one student that did hit that 95%. Now, it didn't matter last year because that was waived, but this year it does matter. So it's really important that we get the message out there that students need to take the state test. So at the district level, I kind of created a communication plan called Purpose, Value, and Importance Communication Plan around state assessments. I spoke with the principals on February 7th during a leader talk, and I shared my plan with them. My plan was really to create a document that schools, teachers, and administrators can use when talking to parents and students about the purpose, the value, and the importance of state assessments. I have given this document to our communication department, and they're going to very shortly start posting social media snippets about the importance and value and purpose of state testing for parents. I have created a district parent letter that will be going home before break, again emphasizing the importance, the purpose, and the value of state assessments. And then the other part of my plan, of course, is to reach out to you. You play an important role in communicating the message of the importance of state testing to students and to parents. So I'm going to open up this document, and we're just going to take a look at it. I'll see if I can make it a little bigger for you. So really, I really have kind of taken the approach that it's all about feedback, right? That's why we do state assessments. It's end of the year. We want to see how well the students learned, give them feedback for what they need to do for the next level. We want to give teachers feedback about how their instruction was. We want to give grade levels in school districts and schools feedback. So that's really how this is all built around feedback. So I'm not going to go over it with you, but there's kind of focus on the importance for students and parents of the reports, the importance for teachers and schools, and then actually the importance of the feedback for the district and state level. So you now have access to this document, and please use it when talking to your students and your parents and getting that message out there. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. Okay. So when we talk about state assessments, there's roles and responsibilities all the way from the superintendent to the student level. Your role as the examiner level, of course, you must hold a Georgia PSC certified certificate and participate in the training, which you're doing now, and then additional training looking at the test administration manual, and then school specific information that your school test coordinator will provide. And of course, follow all the protocols and the procedures with state assessments. If you're going to be a proctor, you need to participate in training, follow procedures for monitoring and test environment. And then even at the student level, the student must make sure that they work diligently during all their test sessions and that they do their very best and complete their test with no cheating involved. I was trying to find a positive way of saying it, but I couldn't. So they can't cheat. All right. So who needs to take the milestones test? So for the end of grade test, you can see from this chart that ELA and math is for all students in 3rd grade through 8th grade. Students in 5th grade and 8th grade take science, and students in 8th grade take social studies. Now in Forsyth County in 8th grade, a student either takes physical science or they take EOG science. Students who take physical science will take the physical science test, and students who take the 8th grade science content will take the EOG test. Okay, the physical science test is no longer an EOC, and it does not count as 20% of the final grade, and the student will take one or the other, not both. And I say that because on the next slide, and we are allowed to do this because we had a science flexibility waiver that was approved, and this is not a change for this year. This is just a renewal of the waiver that we've had in the past. Now, I say that because for all students in middle school who are taking an EOC course, our Algebra 1 students, they must also take the end of grade 8th grade math assessment. Any student taking any EOC course must also take their grade level EOG course. This is all tied back to federal law and the requirements for testing that has to happen in school systems. I'm sorry, I'm trying to move this little thing. There we go. So it's out of our control. It's out of the state's control. It's all back to federal law. Once we went from 8 end of course tests to 4 end of course tests, we lost a lot of the flexibility. Okay, now again, this mainly affects our students who are taking Algebra 1. They will take the 8th grade EOC before they take the Algebra 8th grade, I'm sorry, they'll take the 8th grade EOG before they will take the 8th grade EOC. And you could, you should have a copy of the calendar by now, and you can see that. If students don't take the 8th grade EOG, that impacts your school's 95% participation rate. So in a positive, purposeful manner, let the students know the value and the purpose of taking that EOG assessment, and then it's also the EOC assessment. Okay, so for high school students taking end of course courses, American Lit, Algebra 1, Biology, and U.S. History, they are all required to take the EOC. The only exception is AB, IB, and dual enrollment students for U.S. History only. This is a change since last year. Students taking AP, IB, or dual enrollment dual enrollment courses in American Lit, Algebra 1, or Biology do need to take the EOC. Okay. Now, there is one exception to that AB, IP dual enrollment students taking the American Lit, Biology, US, and Algebra 1 course. So let me give you an example. A student was at a high school and they took biology. they took the end of course test for biology and they passed biology. Then the student decides they want to take AP biology. Okay, that student who's already taken biology, already has course for biology, already took the EOC, they do not need to take the AP biology test. This is not your worry as a teacher. This is the school test coordinator's concern, but I just wanted to let you know that. So last year, the Georgia Milestones Assessments got rid of that minimum time for testing. There's no minimum time for testing anymore, but of course there is a maximum time. On this chart here, you can see that the state gave us the typical times of the testing, but then of course we have the maximum times. School test coordinators will create test sessions based on the maximum times, and any student with extended time, the extended time begins after the maximum time. So how does this impact you as an examiner? Let's say you're administering the 8th grade science test, okay? I'm going to say 5th grade just to make it easy. You're administering the 5th grade science test. The maximum time is 40 minutes. Let's say everyone in the room has completed the test in 30 minutes. Absolutely everybody is done. Then you can end that test session. You don't have to wait until a minimum time. So hopefully that's clear. If not, talk to your school test coordinator about that. So here's a slide that just shows the items that are on the English Language Arts test. This has not changed from last year. There's selected response, constructed response items. There's short constructed response. There's extended constructed response, which is the narrative writing. There's extended writing response, which is in that ELA section 1. There's evidence-based writing response. There's drag and drop. There's paste. There's drop-down lists. There are, under the selected response, there's multiple answers, there's multiple parts. So they're quite involved assessments, but again, they're the same as they have been since last year. Math, you can see the item types as well. And there's graphing, there's keypad input. So lots of different types of items for math and for science and social studies as well. And I'm going to show you some examples of those in a minute. So all students will get a test ticket. The test ticket is one ticket printed on a full page. Full page test ticket can be used as the student's first sheet of scratch paper. But what you need to do is you'll get a roster of the students who are testing in your room. You want to look at the accommodations for any students you know have accommodations. The code will be here. If you don't see that code, then you need to let your school test coordinator know right away, because if they start the test and they're supposed to have a very specific accommodation and you don't see it on the roster and you don't see it on the test ticket, that means that it will not be there when they log into the test. So let's look at the ones that I'm speaking about. Over to the right in this chart, text to speech. That's the read aloud of test questions. Any student who has a read aloud of test questions as an accommodation must have this TTS on their roster and on their test ticket. Okay, your school test coordinator will make sure that's done. They have a report now, they can double check, but you're that third line of defense to make sure the student has that there before they start testing. If they don't have it there, do not let them start testing. Call your school test coordinator right away. Another one is the text-to-speech conditional. That's the reading of ELA reading passages. CC is color chooser, CT is color contrast, and VSL is the video sign language. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 accommodations that must be marked in the platform before the school test coordinator prints the tickets. This activates these accommodations in the platform. Okay, so you're that last line of defense. Please double check those test tickets. Those test tickets and the test rosters are considered secure information. You don't want to share the passwords or usernames with anybody. You don't want to take pictures of them, and those are secure materials, so you will collect them back from the students and return them to the school test coordinator each day. Okay, so that's the overview of milestones. Now let's talk about before testing. So, are you ready? Have you read the test administration manual? Do you know the time and location of the tests? Do you have the equipment you need? Do you understand the accommodations for any of the students? Do you have contacts for your school test coordinator? How are you going to contact them during testing? And we will, of course, make sure that anyone who administers the test is PSC certified. And know that by state requirements, if there's 30 or more students in the classroom, you must have a proctor, okay? So there's a test administration manual that all school test coordinators and examiners must read. There's certain parts in there when you open it up. Part 1 is instruction and everybody must read part 1. And then you need to read the parts that are related to the examiner and read over the scripts. This is a document that is available electronically, and your school test coordinator will send it to you so you have the opportunity to read it. Do not print it out, please. When it comes time to testing day, you will get a paper copy of the script, and only the script, because the state is not providing us paper copies of the test administration manuals anymore. But you must read through this to get a really good understanding of everything you need to do for state testing as an examiner. In the examiner's manual on page 32 through 36, there is a checklist for examiners. There's tasks that need to be done before testing, and then tasks that need to be done after testing. And of course, the script itself is what you do during testing. So please take a look at that. And if you have any questions, talk to your school test coordinator. There's also, if you've done state testing with us before, there's a state testing examiner responsibilities document that we ask everyone to sign at the end of testing. Your school test coordinator should go over this with you during your pre-admin training in addition to watching this video, but I wanted to make sure that you had it and that you're familiar with all of your responsibilities on this chart, and you complete this when you're done testing. Do not sign this before testing, because you can see that there's things that happen during testing that you're saying that you did. It must be signed after testing. Okay. You're responsible for that testing environment setup. You want to make sure that your desks are in such a way that no one can see another person's Chromebook. All right. Maybe you want to kind of set up your class away in a certain way, or your room in a certain way beforehand, and then kind of sit and say, from this angle, can I see someone's computer book if I lean to the left or lean to the right? So make sure there is space and/or dividers between computers. Make sure all instructional materials are covered up. And at the district level, we make sure that Insight software is on all the devices. And then at the school level, you need to make sure that the devices have a full charge and have been powered up before testing. So when you think about the testing environment, right, there should be a clock in the room for you to control, because it is a time test. All right, you should have number 2 pencils, scratch paper should be in your bins, graph paper for EOG and EOC. If your school test coordinator will talk to you as an examiner and say, hey, do you use graph paper? If you do, we'll give it to you. All right. Calculators if needed. You should have a testing do not disturb sign. You should have a no electronic devices sign. Most schools have magnetic testing do not disturb signs, and I do have a no electronic devices sign that school test coordinators can print out, or you can make up your own. Talk to your school test coordinator about that. There's the test administration manual, that script you should have, students' tickets, students' rosters, any lists of accommodations, testing device, which of course are the Chromebooks, and only students who have an accommodation will be using a mouse. You should make sure you have the headsets for all of the students if you have Read Aloud. You should have, your school test coordinator should have a sign out, sign in sheet daily. They should give you the bin or the envelope of materials. You count everything that you're supposed to have. You sign that you have it. Once you sign that, those materials are secure to you. You must keep them secure at all times. You can't leave the bin of test materials in your classroom and walk down the hallway and talk to a colleague, okay? If there's an emergency and you need to talk to a colleague, take that bin with you. All right, if you have to go to the restroom, either get someone to cover your class, take the bin with you, sorry. So if you have a proctor, the proctor can cover your class if you need to use the restroom. So just again, and anything you see on the test, and anything on the test rosters or the test tickets, it's all secure material, and it should not be photographed in any way. It should not be copied in any way. It should not be discussed in any way. So the state does have some great EOG and EOC resources. Their educator resources are really designed for you to use instructionally throughout the year. And there are some student resources such as formula sheets and technology resources. You really don't need to pay attention to that. We'll go over the troubleshooting guide with your ITSs at a training later this month. So scratch paper. So this chart shows you what is the minimum amount of scratch paper students can, what to start with. Students can always have more scratch paper. Once you pass out scratch paper to a student and they put their name on it, it becomes secure test material. You must collect all of it back and give it to your school test coordinator, okay? And then the school test coordinator actually turns the scratch paper into us at the district level, and then we do shred it once testing is completed. So the testing schedule will be given to you by your school test coordinator, and you need to follow the schedule. You cannot deviate from the schedule. On the schedule, ELA Section 1 must be administered on a single day. ELA Sections 2 and 3 must be scheduled on the same day. You'll see that I have some crossouts here because as a district, we have decided that we are not going to do in elementary school the one section one day at a time. We're going to do ELA Section 1 one day, ELA Section 2 and 3 another day, together one day, Math Section 1 and 2 one day, and Science Section 1 and 2 one day. In middle school and high school, we've always done it that way, but that is a change this year. And that change, how that change occurred was I come up with kind of a draft plan schedule. I send it out to schools to school test coordinators for feedback. I get feedback. I send out another one. I send it out again. And one of the elementary principals thought, you know, we take so many weeks testing. Why can't we test the students sections 2 and 3 together in one day for ELA and sections 1 and 2 for math together? And so what I did was I came up with yet another draft and I gave it to all the principals, and all the principals in elementary school voted, and 16 out of the 22 voted to combine the sections. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. And of course, we'll see how it goes this year, and then we'll always take feedback. And here's a copy of the calendar. Again, you must adhere to the calendar. You cannot test anyone before their test grades. You can there can be rolling makeups, and your school test coordinator will work with that. If any students are on hospital homebound, they must follow the same schedule. Virtual students cannot be tested before their grade level. They can be tested after. You'll work with your school test coordinator to determine testing of virtual students. All virtual students and all virtual students will test at their home school. Okay, there are about 3,000 virtual students and 13 full-time virtual teachers, so they certainly cannot test all those students, and we have nowhere to bring them in. So all virtual students will test at the home school. Talk to your school test coordinator about that schedule. And of course, high school, it's a virtual learning week, so students will only be coming to school to test unless there's a student who must take, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that at another time. Okay, so as the teacher, are you ready? Are your students ready? Well, you need to make sure and help your students become familiar with the testing platform, the types of questions, the tools that are available, the calculators and formula sheets, and then any accommodations. They need to know what they're going to look like in testing. So there's a couple ways you can get your students ready. You can access the Experience Online Testing Georgia video, and if you click on this link, it will bring you to the video, and it's just kind of an overview of the platform. There's an Experience Online Testing Georgia website. It must be used in Chrome browser where students can practice. And then the practice test, and the purpose of the practice test is not for the questions, it's for students to become familiar with the platform and with the tools that are available, and indeed if they have accommodations. Okay, and then of course in the Chromebook on the DRC Insight app, there is a practice test as well. So when students are in the ELA section, they need to understand the format of the test. They need to, again, understand the tools, the time. They need to know the time and date of the test, all the different types of items. They need to understand that there's online calculators, and that they can cut, copy, paste, undo, and redo. And you can see the rest of the things. The really important thing is that they understand how to close out the test, and I'll have a slide on that in a minute. So, oops, sorry. The state, the presentation that I'm sharing with you today is a presentation that the state has created, and this is kind of an interactive slide, and it does not seem to be working. Let me right click it, maybe that'll do it. Sorry about that, I apologize. Okay, so here's one. So I wasn't able, unfortunately, to show you, hold on, the reading and evidence-based writing. What you see on this slide is they show you how to turn the pages, and they show you that there's a writer's checklist that's available. So again, I apologize about that. So on the test items, there's a bar graph, and sometimes these bar graphs are a little tricky, so make sure you and the students are familiar with them. If the student isn't sure how to use the technology for an item, you can help them with that, but you cannot do anything to give them the answer. Okay, if they need help with a tool, again, here's another one, I apologize. That was just a drag and drop example. These are all the tools that are available for all students: a calculator, cross-off, graphing tool. You can read their list. You should get on the, as an examiner, you should get on the practice test as well and become familiar with using these tools if the student asks you. There's online masking. An online masking tool is where the student can actually click on the masking tool and it can block off certain areas of text for them. All students have access to the enlargement, to the magnification options, and it magnifies at 1.5 and 2 times the standard size. There are calculators embedded as tools. There's a basic calculator, a scientific calculator, and a graphing tool, and you can see where it is available, what calculators are available for what grade and for what test. Now, the state gives school districts the opportunity to also provide a handheld calculator. We've been doing this ever since online testing started in Forsyth County, and in Forsyth County we will continue to use a handheld calculator. You can see for 6th grade we'll provide a basic calculator, for 7th to 8th grade provide the scientific calculator, the handheld, for Algebra 1, the scientific, and for physical science, the scientific. Now, that calculator that we're providing is the Texas Instruments 30XS Multiview. It's the one we've been using for ever since we started with this, and know that students also have access to the other calculators online on the graphing tool and the other calculators online as well. We're only providing one. The calculators must be cleared for all memory before students use the calculator, and then after the students are done with the calculator, they must be cleared of memory as well. Your school test coordinator will guide you on that, and there is a clearing calculator form that must be completed by anyone who clears the calculators both times. Calculators are not permitted in grades 3 through 5 for math unless it is a conditional accommodation. Their calculators are not permitted in section 1, part A of each of the mathematics tests in grades 6 through 8 in high school. Now, in the testing platform, once the student finishes section 1, part A, there is guidance on the screen for the student that says raise your hand and let your examiner know that you're ready for the calculator. Do not pass out calculators and put them on desks in section 1, part A. We have irregularities every year where the teachers did that, and the students use that calculator in section 1, part A. That could possibly invalidate the student's assessment. Okay, so keep the calculators with you. The students raise their hand, you look at the screen, you see that they are finished with section 1A, and then you provide the calculator. You can collect all the calculators together at the end. Okay. So there are formula sheets that are available electronically, and you can see the formula sheets and/or reference sheet and periodic table that are available below. And it is a school decision if they're going to print the formula sheets and give a paper copy of it and the reference sheet and periodic table. You'll talk to your school test coordinator and they'll let you know the decision that has been made. And I've told them to talk to the teachers to make the decision together. Once these formula sheets can be considered scratch paper as well, they need to be kept track of. They are secure material. They need to be returned to your school test coordinator, and they will return them to us at RAC. As the examiner, you need to think about accommodations. Do you know which students need accommodations? Do you have the hardware that you need for these accommodations? Headsets, for example. Have you made plans for students with extended time? Has your school test coordinator provided you with their plan for extended time? Any departure from any of the list of the allowable accommodations may result in an invalidation. And we're going to talk about those accommodations. So one of the accommodations is the read aloud of test questions, right? So when a student has this, remember, it'll be marked on your roster. You'll see a TTS. It'll be marked on the test ticket. And then once the student starts taking the test, there's a pre-recorded computer voice. The audio plays automatically for each page, but the audio can be restarted for the whole page by using the start, stop, rewind button that will appear on the student's screen. Also, wherever the student sees the little blue dot, they can click on that and just hear that section of it. So again, students can practice this in the online platforms, and that's very important to do, especially if the student's read aloud has been a human reader all year long, okay? And I think it's important that you as the school test coordinator, as the examiner, get in and practice it as well, so you're familiar with what the student will be hearing. Some students who have color choosers, color overlays, what they can do is they can have accommodations that change the color of the text and the color of the background. So if there's a student with this accommodation, the school test coordinator and the examiner, or the teacher of record, if it's different than the examiner, will work with the student and have the student decide which colors they're going to choose beforehand. And again, this is just an accommodation. There's also video sign language. Most students in our district choose to use a human signer, and that's okay. There may be one or two students out there who are using the video sign language. Again, it's a specific accommodation. Know what accommodations your students have before testing. Your school test coordinator will provide a list for you. Examiners must provide accommodations that are documented in TPCs, IEPs, or 504s. TPC is a test participation committee, a test plan for English language learners. IEP is for students with disabilities, and 504s can be for any students. Sometimes students refuse accommodations. You can't force a student to take that accommodation, but you do need to document that they refuse the accommodation and tell your school test coordinator immediately after the test session is over. There are 4 categories of accommodations: setting, presentation, scheduling, and response. So in this setting, here's a list of all of the types of accommodations that can be available for students. If it says all, that means that the accommodation can be from an IEP, a 504, or a TPC. If it says TPC, that means the accommodation is just for ESOL students. If it says IEP, that means the accommodation is just for students with disabilities. So I just wanted you to have an opportunity to see this. Then there are presentation accommodations, again, from the IEP, 504, or TPC. Sometimes there's overlap. Sometimes we have students who have an IEP and a TPC, and they may get some accommodations from the IEP and some accommodations from the TPC. So again, you can read the accommodations and see which students, whether it's an IEP, 504, or TPC. Okay. Again, just wanted you to be familiar with the accommodations that are out there. There are response accommodations as well. If there's a ... after it, that means there was a lot more clarification, and that clarification can be found on the very specific accommodations charts. There's specific accommodation charts for each assessment, each state assessment, and there's specific accommodation charts for students with IEPs and students who are English language learners. And these are the scheduling ones. Some accommodations, again, are controlled by the testing platform, such as text-to-speech, and some accommodations are controlled by the examiner, such as extended time. Okay, that was a lot of information. The nice thing is you can go back, you can play the recording again if you wish, and there is a PowerPoint that you can go back and look at as well. All right, so examiner responsibilities and activities during testing. We haven't talked about cell phones yet. So cell phones are not allowed in the testing environment. Now, we say that broadly. When I say cell phones, I mean any type of electronic device, smartwatches, anything that a student can use to access the internet should not be brought into the classroom. Now, middle schools, if they have lockers that lock, high schools, if they have lockers that lock, they can keep them there. If there's nowhere else for the student to keep their devices, then the examiner and the school test coordinator have to talk about a plan of how that examiner is going to collect those devices, keep them away from the children, and then return them to the children after testing is over, okay? If there is an event where a cell phone just goes off, right? And it's in a backpack. Let's say he's told the kids to keep their cell phones in the backpack and it just goes off. That's not a testing irregularity, okay? It was years ago. It's not anymore because anybody and everybody now has cell phones. So it's just, you need to let your school test coordinator know, you document it, and you have the student quietly get up and turn it off, all right? If you find a student has a cell phone on their possession and they're using it to cheat, you have to be 100% Well, call your school test coordinator, and then you guys decide if it has been cheating. If you're 100 and there's no doubt in your mind, you have proof and evidence that they were cheating, stop the test. Okay. Typically, though, you may just suspect. If you suspect that a student is cheating, of course, take their device from them and allow them to finish the test. That is really the safest route to be 100% sure that the student was cheating, unless you can look at their phone and you can see that they've Googled, an answer to one of the questions. That would be 100% proof. But if not, if you just suspect that they may have been like, oh, nothing, I'm not doing anything, then just collect their phone from them and allow them to finish the testing. And we can always do an investigation later. Okay. Now, let's talk about examiners and technology. So last year, the state came out and said that examiners can have their cell phones and or smartwatches in the testing room, but they must be powered off and only used for emergencies. And when I'm saying emergencies, like, everybody out, someone passes out in the classroom, something, emergencies, only emergencies, not a student has to use the restroom or you need to use the restroom. We talked to the school test coordinators during their training, and I said they've got to come up with some type of way for you to communicate with the hall monitor or communicate with the school test coordinator. Should you have minor interruptions, like a student needs to be escorted to the bathroom, or you need a break and you need to use the restroom. Okay. Now, examiners should not be on any technology during the administration of the state assessments. We don't want you obviously checking your cell phone, checking your text on your laptop in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. And that did happen last year. Okay, so your responsibility is to monitor and walk around and provide support for students technologically. Okay. So immediately before testing, you want to make sure you've got your testing do not disturb sign up, make sure there's no electronic devices, sign up, make sure all students have all the materials they need, verify the students that have assigned accommodations before testing are on their test tickets, make sure each student who's getting the test ticket is getting the right test ticket, verify that each student is present for testing, and record attendance. Now, when you're ready to start testing on the Chromebooks, you'll open up the Chromebook, and in the bottom left, you'll see apps. You'll click on the apps, and then you'll see the DRC Insight Online Assessments app. You'll click on that, and then this is the screen that you'll see. You'll notice EOC is on the left and EOG is on the right. You want to make sure you click on the right assessment. If a student clicks on the wrong assessment and they go to use their login and password, it won't work. So if a student raises their hand and says my login and password won't work, that's the first thing you want to check. Are they in the right testing session? Okay. Then the student types in their username and password from their test ticket, and then they click sign in. You will get, again, that test administrator script, and you must follow that script exactly. Every time where it says say, you say say. You cannot deviate at all from the script. You must read everything from the script. The italics are directions for you and things to think about for you. Those should not be read out loud. You may repeat any part of the directions exactly as printed as many times as needed. Directions may not be paraphrased. Under no circumstances should you suggest answers or evaluate student work during the testing session. All school system personnel are prohibited from examining the contents of this assessment. Read aloud word for word the material that's printed in bold type and preceded by the word say. The material in italics type is information for you and should not be read to the students. Under no circumstances should students be allowed to access any software applications or internet sites in the testing environment. There is no minimum time for testing. If all students have submitted the test, the examiner should complete the test session. This is, I read this slide out loud specifically because it's very, very, very important. There is a pause functionality in the test should a student need to use the restroom or take a break for whatever reason. They get called to the office again for whatever reason. They need to go take medicine. They can click the pause button, and the pause button will be paused for 20 minutes. If the student's not back in 20 minutes, then the test will close out. But if the student comes back at 25 minutes, again, they can log back in and pick up right where they left off. The student will not lose any answer choices, sticky notes, or flags, or anything that they have already saved. Okay. Your school test coordinator should give you a sheet to document any students who have any types of interruptions during the testing time. Okay, I'm a little bit ahead of myself. Sorry. School test coordinators, again, will provide you with the form or document to document bathroom breaks, illnesses, any type of behavior, any things that might be possible irregularities, or anything else that may happen out of the normal confines of the testing situation. And be very specific. And if a student does get a pause or get an interruption, please mark down the time that they had to leave for the restroom or became ill or behavior started. If a student uses the bathroom or there's any type of test interruption, then the student comes back to testing, they must be given that time back. A student goes to the restroom for 8 minutes, they must get that 8 minutes back. So that's why it's real important that you document what time the interruption happens. What happens if a student gets sick? Of course, contact your school test coordinator right away. Document the time, and if possible, find out what question the student was on, because that's something I'm going to ask the school test coordinator, and that's something that the state will ask me when we're looking at, can the student be allowed to finish the test? Should it be an irregularity, or shouldn't it? Again, if a student gets sick prior to starting the test, they haven't logged in or anything, that's fine. We don't need to record that to the state. But if a student gets sick after testing has completed, like they get sick between section 1 and section 2, again, and then they go home and they can't complete section 2, that's an irregularity, and the school test coordinator needs to know that. They need to tell me, and then we move on from there. If a student gets sick while testing in one of the sections, the test scores may be invalidated by the DOE. We just don't know. So again, if a student's going to be sick, of course, do everything you need to do for their comfort, and talk to your school test coordinator, and then your school test coordinator will be the one to contact me, and we'll decide what to do from there. If there are network issues, the platform is designed to try to connect for up to 5 minutes. Sometimes there may be connectivity issues, and it'll say here, connection retry in progress. If you have any issues, and all of a sudden, one of the error messages, if you will, pops up on the screen and you don't see any testing information in the background, we need to see what errors are popping up. So when your school test coordinator comes, when your ITS comes, they're going to take a picture of this. You don't do that. That's their responsibility. And then we need to see that. And from there, we can determine what situations we need to take care of and how we can help you. Here's just a list of some testing irregularities. Again, anything that happens out of the norm, you let your school test coordinator know, and then they'll take it from there. Again, like we've talked about earlier, a student becomes ill during testing, a student leaves the testing session without an escort. If a student needs to use the restroom, there should be a hall monitor there, or someone or a proctor should escort them. A student doesn't receive an accommodation. A student refuses accommodation. You find a student who has access to an electronic device. Kids are savvy. They figure out a way on the Chromebook to I don't know what they could do. An adult provides inappropriate assistance to a student. A student is provided with inappropriate tools, the calculator and the non-calculator section. Here's what I want to say about state testing, right? We are human beings. We all make mistakes. We want to do our best, but mistakes happen. The most important thing is that you're honest and you're truthful, and you talk to your school test coordinator, and they call me, and we figure it out from there. All right. And the state really understands that we're all human beings and all make mistakes as well. And we'll deal with the mistakes and we'll handle them, and then we'll move forward. And then it's done, right? Where we run into problems and where we may run into issues is when mistakes are hidden and we find out about them later, or when things are done intentionally to violate the test security, such as helping students, taking a picture of a question on a test, things like that. Okay. Students need to know, and talk to your students about ahead of time. They need to make sure that they keep their eyes on their own test. They need to know that they cannot access unallowable aids. They cannot preview the content ahead of time. They can't use cell phones, smartwatches, any other type of electronic devices. If any cheating is confirmed, then their scores will be invalidated. And I will let you know that the state, I don't know how they do this, but they monitor social media, they monitor internet access. And I have gotten a call from the state, and it tells me what school, what time, what student access the internet, and the question and the information that they're accessing, and that they've cheated. Blows my mind that can happen, but they can. So please let your students know that. What is active monitoring? You're the test examiner. What do? You're actively walking around the testing room. You're monitoring the students' progress. You're assisting them with technology should they need be. They want to use a sticky note tool, but they don't know how. They're struggling to use the bar graph. How do they do that? Make sure that the students are in the correct test session. Make sure you give them section 1 or section 2 the right test ticket, okay? You should only get in your bin the test tickets that you need for that particular test session, that particular day, okay? Check that the students did not bring any prohibited items. Plan an activity for students to do after they finish. Read a book. That's a school decision on you. I'm fine with it at the district level, but it should be a school decision. Some schools don't like to do that. And if they're going to read a book, the book shouldn't have anything to do with the content of, obviously, of what they're going to be tested on. So here's some don'ts. Don't sit at your desk and do personal work or other work. Don't answer any content questions. Don't point to test content. Don't review test pictures or share test content. Don't leave students or test materials unattended for any length of time. Don't allow students to have access to any devices. Don't allow students to access any unauthorized materials. Okay? So again, some improper monitoring. Test examiners should never, again, I'm stressing it again, and I'm sharing this information with you because this is the information that the state has given as a tool for me to train you, and they are reiterating again. Do not review test content, do not review student responses, do not memorize test content, do not discuss test content with students or other staff members or anyone, do not take photos of test content, and do not share test content on social media. I know none of you will do that, but it's just something, again, I have to share. Now, students sometimes don't exit their test properly. If they don't exit their test properly, their test is not sent to be scored. They actually will show up in the platform as in progress. So the school test coordinators are monitoring this on a daily basis, and if students are in progress, there's a way to fix that. But when you're in the classroom with them, you want to help them and make sure that they exit the test properly. Okay, students must the submit button students must click, it should say, the submit button, and then they review and end test, and then they have to click the submit button. I think what happens sometimes is students review the questions, but then they click end test, but that they never click submit. So that's very important. Okay. Once they click submit, obviously they cannot go back. So what are some things you can do to reduce irregularities? You're participating in the training today. You're reading the test administration manual. There is a document called the Student Assessment Handbook. It's a document, it's a 170-page document that I use and that your school test coordinators use. It is available on the DOE website should you ever want to take a look at it. So the protocol is you as the examiner or any staff person reports any irregularity, any issues, any other things that come up to the school test coordinator. The school test coordinator calls me, and then I make a decision and then of course the school test coordinator informs the principal, and then I of course make the decision, do I need to contact the DOE or not? Now, when I've been talking about irregularities a lot, and I did not clarify this. So when the student when there's an irregularity, okay, that just means that something out of the norm happened, something out of the standard administration happened. And the student does get a score, and we mark something in the student platform, and then when the data file comes back, there is a column that will indicate if there was an irregularity or not. And we do that because if there was an irregularity that was serious enough, then are the scores as accurate as the scores need to be. So it's something that, need to be looked at. It's not marked as negative for the teacher, negative for the student. It's not on their report in any way. Sometimes irregularities are significant enough that the state deems that it should be invalidated and the student does not get a score. That is a state decision. At the district level, we do not determine invalidations. Okay, so just a little clarity on that. Okay, so when you report something to the school test coordinator and they call me, I'm going to ask them some questions. I'm going to ask them what happened, who was involved, to what degree was the student disadvantaged or advantaged, what information supports the district's recommendations or conclusions. So your school test coordinator is going to in turn ask you these questions, so be able to answer them. All right, and again, we talked about this. You want to document anytime a student leaves the classroom and what time they left, if you can, what question they were on, things like that. So Here's some, I'm going to click them all up at one time. So for documentation, Mrs. Smith allowed Malcolm Jacobs to walk unsupervised to the office prior to the break. He was away for 10 minutes. The video shows he went straight to the office. While in the office, he did not have access to electronic equipment or anything related to testing. He completed his test before the examiner called time. So this is what we're looking for when we're talking about documentation. Okay. So our biggest issues with irregularities are accommodation errors, okay? So you as the examiner want to make sure you know the accommodations that the student should be receiving. You have a list of those accommodations. You want to make sure you check the student's test ticket and the roster for those specific accommodations that are controlled by the platform. Test sessions should begin earlier to avoid any conflicts with lunch and school dismissal. Students cannot take a section of the test, go and have lunch, and then come back. We've talked to school test coordinators about that. Make sure you have any type of materials you need for the students for any types of accommodations, headsets, braille booklets, adaptive keyboards, whatever the students might need. So for read aloud, how do you minimize the risk for the read aloud accommodation? Make sure there's proper management of the online test sessions. That's the school test coordinator's responsibility. Verify that the students have functional headsets. Verify that the computer sound is working properly. Students should tell the examiner if the sound's not working, so double check with them, hey, can you hear? Verify that the correct TTS accommodation is checked on the test ticket, like we've talked about earlier, okay? How do you minimize the risk of cell phones? Families need to know ahead of time that cell phones, smartwatches are prohibited in the testing environment. Actively monitor your test sessions. Put your no cell phone sign up. Devise a method to collect and redistribute the devices if there's no other place for the students to leave the devices. And here's just some examples of maybe you have a raffle ticket, you mark a number on it, you give the student the one with the number 1, you keep the number 1, tape it to the device anyway, and you know how you want to make sure the whole point of these are how do you make sure the student gets the correct device back. You can see a picture of a little box here. I've seen lots of creative ways for people to keep track of cell phones. We've talked about the confirmed cheating already. Again, do not stop a student from testing unless you're 100% sure you and the school test coordinator have made sure that the student has not cheated. If you suspect cheating, take the device and then allow them to finish testing and we'll investigate after, okay? Ensure that students understand the directions. Examiners and students should understand how additional time is allocated in increments in the examiner's manual. Follow the directions exactly about the times. And then, of course, we've talked already about practice testing, okay? Students must understand when they see this is the no calculator section. They should not have a calculator. Again, it's that section 1, part A of the math assessments in middle school and high schools. And it is, the calculator will not appear electronically, but you want to make sure they don't have the handheld calculator at that time. And then, of course, they'll see stop as well. So after testing, you want to collect all your materials each day and make sure you return everything that your examiner gave you, the test ticket, scratch paper, used and not used, rosters, calculators, anything they gave you, you return back. And then you want to make sure your school examiner counts it in. So, and then they'll sign saying, yes, you returned the exact amount of items that you were given. Very important you do that every day. Now, results. So as I mentioned earlier, we will have interactive reports this year. There will be additional training coming very, very soon. And will be getting a DRC account. Once you see that email from DRC, you'll activate your account. And then you will be trained on how to access your reports. So as far as the parents go, what we do is once all of the results are final, then the results are uploaded into the parent portal in SLDS. We do that here. We get our data file, we upload the results, and then we send out a parent messenger. Again, this is usually after school is over. It's usually in June. Later in July, then the state actually uploads the individual student reports into the parent portal. Once that happens, again, we send home another messenger. We're not going to we haven't for several years now gotten paper copies of ISRs. Should a parent ask for one, refer them to the school test coordinator, and the school test coordinator can print one for them. Okay? So I know that was a lot. I thank you very, very much for your time and energy and effort. And let's all have a great testing season. And again, your school test coordinator and your ITS will help you and we will have a wonderful experience. Thank you very, very much for your time.